What is up, guys? Before we start the show today, I have to announce that Player vs. Podcast, aka Listener Request Month, is coming back. With April being the show's anniversary, I can't think of a better way to celebrate than to let you guys request a game for me to play and cover on the podcast. This is your chance to get me to play literally anything. Want to hear me talk about Mega Man X way before it's time to come up on the show? You can do that. Did I just recently slander a game that you love and you want to make me completely miserable by making me play Bubsy 3D? I wouldn't recommend that, but that's something that you can do. But before we start getting trigger happy here, there are some rules to keep in mind. First things first, you cannot submit a game that I've already covered. Should go without saying. I know I covered a lot. Do your due diligence and just double check the feed. You don't want your submission tossed out if it gets picked. Next, make sure that you submit at least 2 games. This is not only to cover your butt in case I have covered one of the games that you submitted, but it also ensures that one of your games gets picked in the event that I do not own the game. Next is sort of a courtesy rule here. Don't go crazy with the 80-hour JRPGs or anything like that. I don't mind long games, but please be mindful of not only my time, but other listeners' ballots as well. The shorter the game, the more I can talk about that month. Ideally, I would like to cover 3 games, so please try to keep your picks to no more than 20 hours, I would say. If you're not sure, you can always check your submissions on howlongtobeat.com. And lastly, if you're a patron, well, first of all, thank you. I love you. But if you are, you can get up to 2 extra submissions for the month. So you can double or triple up on a title, or enter 3 different games into the pool. It's completely up to you. Finally, where do you send these submissions? Well, you can go to mainquestpod.com. That's mainquestpod.com. And you can submit an email there. You can also contact me directly on the social media platform of your choice. And you can find those links at linktr.ee/mainquestpod. That address again is linktr.ee/mainquestpod. The deadline to submit the games you want me to play is Thursday, February 6th. That deadline is, again, Thursday, February 6th. It's going to come up faster than you think. So, once again, send those submissions to mainquestpod.com or find those social links at linktr.ee/mainquestpod. And of course, have fun and good luck. And now on to the show. Welcome back to another episode of the Main Quest Podcast. This is, of course, the #1 retro gaming podcast that is still available on Channel 3. As always, I am your host, Keith. Welcome to 2025. I think the most common thing to say is how horrible the previous year was, and I'd be lying if I told you that it wasn't. Because man, I just want you to know that no matter what you have gone through or what you're going through, just know you're not the only one. Just keep that in mind. You know, whatever you're going through, hang in there, push through, persevere. Things will always get better. And you should take the opportunity to learn from what's going on around you, and you will be really surprised at what you can endure. You know, you never stop growing, you never stop learning. It doesn't matter what age you are. You know, life has a way of surprising you and forcing you to adapt to new things. And it might not happen daily or weekly or even monthly, but It will happen, and it's going to happen to you more than others, or vice versa, depending on the situation, but life is never stagnant. And if it feels that way, honestly, I hope you're okay. I hope you're doing all right. We always ask if the retro video games hold up, but we never ask each other how we're holding up. So maybe consider reaching out to someone that you haven't spoke to in a while this year. And you know what? If your life is stagnant and you are okay, then maybe you're just lucky. God knows I need a long, stagnant break from life. Anyway, speaking of breaks, for the entirety of 2024, I took a break from buying video games. It was a year of tackling my backlog, and you can hear all about it if you join the Patreon, which I'm sure there was an ad that played or will be played at some point in this episode. But the link for that is in the show notes. The episode in question is kind of a game of the year type of thing, but also not really. It's just an off-the-cuff discussion on all of the games that I played this year, including some, reminiscing on the projects that I played them for, and so on. So, if that is something you might be interested in, go check it out. If you decide to join the Patreon, you're also going to get a few other perks there as well. I'm trying my best to make it worth your time and money. So, I just got off a call with B. Ross of the Super Garbage Day podcast. If you don't know, Super Garbage Day is another retro gaming podcast that I got into a few years back, one that I still listen to regularly and have become fortunate enough to become good friends with off air as well. I'm honored to have B. Ross back. I always have a great time talking to him, and I feel like he's one of those guys where I could probably just sit down and have a 2-hour podcast talking about kind of nothing at all, like the Seinfeld of podcasts or something. I've actually never even seen a single episode of Seinfeld. I just know that it's apparently about nothing. I don't know. Anyway, I'm glad B. Ross is back. I'm glad he's here. He will always have a place here in these hallowed halls of the Main Quest podcast. We had a great time catching up, talking about tough times here and talking about tough games. Because it's Joe and Mac here on the Main Quest. Yeah, I think you're worried too much about the post process of the podcast.
Well,
as opposed to just enjoying the podcast.
That's really where I put all my effort is in like the editing and like the post production, and not so much in the pre production. Because as you know, my style is very raw, and I'm an anxious person, and I do not do well with like hyper scripted things. So, I put all that energy into like the post.
I just don't ever overthink anything until something terrible happens, like in the post processing. Because recently a little behind the scenes when I was doing the Knuckles Chaotix episode, like an entire 40 minutes was just gone in the middle of the podcast. And this was after thank you. So luckily I have Reaper set up to save the projects like every 15 minutes. So that I can, if anything that destructive ever happens, I can go back, half hour, 45 minutes earlier from my previous save and kind of fix the file from there. So fortunately, 2020 Keith, when he was setting up audio recording software, thought of that.
That's good.
I still had to edit the episode then all over again, even though it had already been done. So.
That's the worst.
Yeah. Could have been way worse. I could not have had an episode. So
it could have been disastrous, but it's cool. We're glad you're back, man.
Thanks.
Yeah, you sound great here. So from my end, I want you to clear something up though, and you don't have to. but I had this theory about what was going on in your life, and it's only because I don't know. As a person, I'm very open about all my problems, as you know, like talking trash and all my struggles. I was curious, did you go through like a really, really severe breakup?
Yeah.
And then you had to like move out and like do all that stuff? I'm not going to pry.
Yeah.
I'm not going to pry, but I'm just saying like well, I'm glad that you overcame that. Ultimately, the whole point of this is that I'm glad you overcame that and you came back to the, the things that you like to do and the communities that love you, man. So
I want to back up a little bit. I didn't end the podcast because of a breakup. That was
right.
Way, way, way before a breakup even happened. So.
Oh, well, I mean, it's also just, I always feel there's always a thread or at least a trend in like December where people just start getting burnt out, especially with like how hectic weather changes and like finances, especially if you have kids, I had my little episode last year, but that was like a mental health crisis. But I'm glad you're doing better. I don't know if you're doing better, but I'm glad that you're back. So.
Moving on is the best term that I can apply to my situation. Is just ready to move on.
2,000 years later.
And so that comes with all of its own. It comes with all of its own doubts and everything, and certain baggage, and all of that other. But honestly, like the worst part of the entire thing is I really miss being a dad.
Oh man, that's rough, dude. Because as a father, like I couldn't imagine. I've been lucky enough to always like kind of be the primary parent because the mother. Do not put this out there.
2,000 years later.
Joe and Mac, right?
Yeah, we should start talking about some video games, right? I should probably like formally introduce you. So the voice that you guys have been hearing, dear listener, he is not a GameStop employee. In fact, he is a garbage man. He is a retro gaming garbage man. He is, of course, one half of the Super Garbage Day podcast. Welcome back to the show, B. Ross.
Keith, it is such a pleasure to be back. Also, I don't know what the deal is with every time we record and you just somehow spiritually ruin my microphone setup, but I'm coming at you with lesser quality due to that. And of course, I'm taking none of the blame. Not an operator issue.
Is it performance anxiety?
Always. Well, yeah, this is the main quest, dog. This is the #1 retro video game podcast.
Some would say that, yeah.
In the rural city you live in.
We actually just got doused with snow. Doused with snow? Pounded with snow. Pounded with snow.
Doused and pounded. That was in my search engine on Pornhub.
It brings up the question. You're a garbage man. You're driving a garbage truck. How well do garbage trucks actually handle in snow?
Kind of depends. I mean, I'm out in the elements all the time because I drive a smaller garbage truck for a rural community. And so I'm stepping out of the car 400 times a day to like do the can stuff. Like I don't have like the cool hand, stay inside and work some controls. Now I get out there, I got to do it all old school style. And, my truck it depends because if the snow's bad enough here, see, our city is not equipped for heavy weather situations, yet it happens here. So it kind of just shuts everything down. My truck's fine, but there are like places I can't drive to because I literally I will die because there's such steep inclines and my truck will just slip and just flip over. But ultimately it does okay for the most part. So last year we had this crazy freeze for like a week where it was so everything was covered in ice. Nobody could do anything. Everything shut down. I didn't have to work for a week because they were like, I can't even get to work. But my boss is so cool. He's like an old school guy. It's a it's a little garbage company that I work for. It's not like a major one. And it's like the cutest, most old school thing ever. I'm the only person that works for this company who isn't in the family. But they treat me like family. But, that week when I couldn't work, he still paid me. So, I mean, I'm very, very happy to be a part of this company, but to answer your question in super long form instead of just really quickly as I should have, no, my truck does not handle well in snow.
That's awesome that you not only enjoy your job as much as you do, but look at the job as the company specifically that you work for. So think of it so fondly as you do. Not a lot of people can can say that about the company that they work for. So that's really cool.
There's pros and cons, right?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And especially if it's a smaller company. I mean, I am working for a smaller company currently. And one of the big changes that I went through this year, well, I should say in 2024, this is coming out after the new year, but one of the bigger changes that I went through is that my company was sold. And so that came with like a whole lot of question marks. So
that's scary.
It's a double-edged sword working for a smaller operation because anything can happen. You're not backed by people in suits and making decisions and stuff for the company and stuff like that.
Which sucks to be at the mercy of because, like I do feel ultimately I don't get paid as well as most garbage men do, but I do have like massive job security because they hired me so that the owner of the company, we call him the grandpa, and he is totally like my grandpa, so that he could retire. So like, they ain't getting rid of me, but yeah, it's great. And then like, what's weird is you're going to find this crazy. The whole company is ran with no computers. He is so old school. He literally types up everything on a typewriter. All of their bills, they only can pay with checks or cash, and everything is done offline. It is insane and very archaic and also frustrating. But like I said, there's that like family environment and that job security of like, I'm not one day going to wake up, they sold the company, and now there's new bosses who have new KPIs and things I have to follow, and like I have to worry all the time. So sorry.
I don't know if I should be impressed by the fact that they are pen and paper type of company because that
I am.
I mean, it's sort of impressive, but it's like you have to be incredibly organized.
Well, to be fair, the clientele are all boomers because it's a rural kind of nicer area that I work for. So they're all kind of used to it. So I kind of see their angle. Like if they were to change things up, it would actually disrupt the company pretty severely. Yeah. Shout out to my company. I don't want to say their name though.
No problem. Yeah. No, you don't want to get doxxed.
Super garbage service.
Well, speaking of super garbage, well, I don't know. I don't want to give my thoughts away. We should probably talk about the game that we played today.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, let's do that. I've got a lot to say, and I know you do too.
Today we played Joe and Mac. So as always, we start with our previous histories with the game. And I think I'll kick this one off with you first, B. Ross. When was the first time you played or came across Joe and Mac?
Joe and Mac is like, it's really cemented in my memories as a game I adored. I remember renting it all the time for the Super Nintendo. I was unaware there was a Genesis version of it. At the time I had a Super Nintendo, my Genesis was kind of like, I don't even think I owned it anymore. So I wasn't in the zeitgeist of even like following any of the Genesis ports or copies or versions. I was just strictly a Super Nintendo kid at that point. And I remember this game being colorful, being charming, being warm. And I purchased it earlier this year. It was dirt cheap. It was like $12 for the cartridge. I bought the Super Nintendo version and replayed it. And I was like, man, yeah, this brings back a lot of memories, but this is also kind of janky. But in regards to the Genesis version, I have now experienced it due to you in this episode. And it's crazy to play them both. And I did both. I did that this week. I attempted to beat the Genesis one, and then I played the Super Nintendo one. Man, there's a lot of differences. And it's really cool how these games, I don't know, specifically Joe and Mac for some reason just is a major memory of my childhood, but I can't really pinpoint when and where. And I wonder if that's the same feeling a lot of people have who like Joe and Mac.
When I think back to my time with Joe and Mac, well, first of all, I mean, it was like probably one of my favorite games when I was growing up, and I didn't actually own it. It was a game that I constantly rented, and because I had both the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis, if the local rental store, shout out to North Shore Video, doesn't exist anymore, so it doesn't matter.
Rest in peace.
I think they let mom and pop business. I think they went out in like 99 or 2000. So yeah, if they didn't have one copy of the game, if the Genesis game was out, I'd go get the Super Nintendo one. If the Super Nintendo one wasn't there, I'd go get the Genesis one. And when I think back to it, it's like a lot of these games, especially these caveman games. Like I did Chuck Rock a couple years ago at this point, and I'm like, yeah, these games are like super easy. And then I picked them up today, and I'm like, oh, this is a lot harder than I remember it being. It was really kicking my butt, man.
Well, have you played the Super Nintendo one?
For Joe and Mac?
Yeah. Have you played that version?
Not recently, not to compare to this Genesis version, which is going to be interesting having your thoughts on both since you just played them recently.
Yeah, it's actually it's crazy how different they are and aren't.
I mean, I've only read about the differences. Before tonight, I hadn't picked up Joe and Max since I was a kid, probably since like 1995 or whatever. I mostly rented this a lot. It was one of those rentals where it's like I should have just ended up buying it. I played it a lot with my brother. I also played it a lot with at my friend's house. He had a Sega Genesis, so this was the one that we played the most. And yeah, I mean, I don't remember exactly why I loved this game so much. And I don't know what it was about the 90s, man. Like, there were caveman games all over the place, and I feel like I played them all.
Yeah, did you play Big Nose?
No, what is that?
It's this weird, like, unlicensed NES. I think there's a couple of them, but it's like a Big Nose Freakout. It's one of those gold more plasticky cartridges. Yeah, but you're right, though. There were like a lot of like prehistoric, outside of the Flintstones, there were a lot of caveman games that I didn't even think about till now. Like, yeah, there were a lot.
OG listeners of the podcast, going back to episode 3, I covered Bonk, and I did Bonk's Adventure. Those are, compared to Chuck Rock and Joe and Mac, those are severely easier games. Those are walks in the park compared to what I'm playing now.
Also, wasn't Bonk kind of the unofficial mascot of the TurboGrafx?
Yeah, they tried to make him into something. Whether or not it worked out is still on the table.
Well, it definitely didn't, but yeah.
Well, I mean, even back then, the first Bonk game was ported to the NES. So yeah. It was kind of like a multi-platform title. So you can't really have a mascot, but then also put your games out on everything else. It doesn't really work out that way.
It's a great point.
In a nutshell, that's pretty much my previous history with Joe and Mac. There's not a ton there. There's not a lot that I could remember other than just being like, oh yeah, this is really easy. And maybe that's because I played it with a friend, Playing it solo is a whole different can of worms there.
I think it stuck in my memory specifically with my history with it because of how colorful and enormous everything was. And how I was like impressed with like the bosses and everything at the time, specifically. Yeah,
I think you have a point because a lot of these caveman games, they are very expressive. Chuck Rock had very expressive sprites. Bonk had very expressive sprites that, it would remind you of like a Saturday morning cartoon almost. There's something about these games specifically that led to just like good big, bold sprite animation.
Yeah, they almost seem like SNK made them. Like there was something about the character that was created here.
I wouldn't go that far. Let's pump the brakes a little bit.
Well, at least specifically with this IP, not all, but
well, we could talk about that a little bit more in the presentation. Let's slide into the development history for Joe and Mac. So Joe and Mac, aka Caveman Ninja, aka Caveman Ninja : Joe and Mac, aka Joe and Mac : Caveman Fight.
There's no ninja. I don't understand the ninja thing. Yeah, like
maybe the flips. I don't know.
Yeah.
Congratulations, B. Ross. This is the second ninja video game that you've played with me.
That's right.
Yeah.
Woo. This is our thing. This and Resident Evil on my show.
Right. So it's a platformer developed by Eden Entertainment Software and published by Data East. I think this might be the first Data East game that I've covered. Is Burger Time a Data East game?
It is. It's old Data East Arcade.
Okay, that might be the other one. I don't think I've covered much from Data East now that I think about it. So Joe and Mac was directed by Makoto Kikuchi, and designing the game were Chink. God damn it, it's still Chink or Chinke, Mitsutoshi Satao, and Maya and Asapan. And then the programmer for sounds and the sound effects and music, Hiroyuki Yoshida. As far as the development goes, I mean, there's really not a ton out there. The one thing I was surprised by was that this was an arcade game. And you mentioned in your previous history nothing about it being an arcade game. So was that
I didn't know
something
either.
you were even...
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
No idea. I didn't know this was an arcade game. And apparently the Genesis one is very faithful, more faithful to the arcade. So, yeah, very surprising.
When I found out about that, in my memory, it had never felt like an arcade game. But when I was playing it for the show, I was like, oh, yeah, I could totally see this being a quarter muncher. And with the way they implemented co-op, I'm like, yeah, this through and through, I feel like this game was meant to be played co-op and not single player, just because of its arcade roots.
It also has two characters as the title, so that kind of promotes it, play both.
Yeah, true. I did find this quote from Eden Entertainment's Stuart Middleton. He was a programmer on the Genesis port. And this is specifically about the work that they had to put in to actually put the game on from arcades onto the Genesis. And Stuart says, quote, "We felt we made a faithful copy of the arcade original. We actually took the graphics from the arcade machine and converted them directly for the conversion. The Genesis didn't have enough memory to contain the levels, so we came up with a process where we could copy across new background graphics on the fly so that we could get everything in. The sprites were more of a challenge, but Tim worked really hard to faithfully reproduce the game with the limitations of the Genesis compared to the original arcade machine. We did have to cut back in some areas, but I think they were few and far between," end quote.
Yeah.
And considering you just played both of versions for the Super Nintendo and the Genesis, I feel like this is kind of like a good quote to keep in mind as we get into the gameplay in a minute here, because the differences between this, the arcade, and the Super Nintendo versions are minimal, but you know what they tend to say, sometimes an inch makes all the difference, right? So even just the slightest of changes, can actually drastically change the way the game is.
Yeah. God, it's his name. I'm sorry. Forgive us.
Joe and Mac was released in 1994 for the Sega Mega Drive and Genesis. It was the final conversion of the game to come out, actually. And so, of course, it was preceded by the arcade, MS-DOS, Super Nintendo, Amiga, NES, and Game Boy versions.
There's an NES version of this?
They couldn't quit that thing, man. That thing was supported for a long time.
Interesting.
Review scores. For context, GamePro gave it a 70%. Electronic Gaming Monthly gave it 70%. Game Rankings has it sitting at 75. All Game, 3.5 out of 5 stars. And Williams Wonder Sick Meds on eBay gave it a 5 out of 5, saying, quote, "It's great, love it, classic, very, very hard and stiff, perfect," end quote.
William Wonder Stick Meds. That's my go-to source. Wow. I think he just wanted to make a dick joke, but...
Sliding into the retro recollections portion of the show here, and this is the portion of the show where you, dear listener, can contribute your own thoughts and reviews of the game in question. And all you have to do is just keep a lookout on the socials or the, I think I'm going to make my Discord public instead of just for the patrons.
By the way, I got to say something about your Discord. Not to interrupt you.
Yes.
But I can't,
Yes.
I keep laughing at the fact that the first time we did a show together, or, I don't know if I was guest on your show or you were on mine, but I remember you telling me, here's my Discord link. I only use it for things like this. It's not really populated. There's nothing there. It's bare bones, just so that we can connect on what we're talking about. And not even like 3 months later when we did another show together, that Discord's like out of control, like 40,000 different categories, all these user inputs, all this engagement. And I'm like, what? So I just had to bring up how funny that is to me. Your Discord's popping. It's awesome. People listening, please join it.
I panicked because I was like, oh, maybe I should actually care for this community that is growing here. So,
well, you did a good job.
Oh, thanks. I'm doing my best. So getting to our first retro recollection here is from Mast Keaton. And they say, I have no thoughts on the game. I'm just happy to see you back. I missed you, buddy. Oh,
yeah, we all feel that.
Dave from the Remember 64 podcast says, the first 2 Joe and Matt games are among the first co-op experiences I had with my brother, and I love them.
Oh, yeah, there's a part 2.
I did not know the arcade. I did not know there was another Joe and Mac. I had fell off of these types of games probably by the time a second Joe and Mac even came out.
Man, I forgot about part 2. I don't think I've ever played it.
I don't think so. I might check it out. And then finally, we've got Phil of Deleted Saves podcast, who says, what a weird and fun little game, which is high praise coming from Phil. So,
well, you just loaded 2 new podcasts I didn't know about onto my repertoire. So thank you. Remember the 64 podcast and Deleted Saves. Shout out.
hey there, guys. You know that I've always tried my best to run ads or sponsorships that are only relevant to the show. I'm not going to sit here and try and sell you beds or therapists or dick pills. If it has nothing to do with the program that I put out for you guys and it doesn't affect the show in a positive way, I'm not going to sponsor it. I do it by myself. It's my money. It's also some of your money too. If you yourself would like to sponsor The Main Quest, you can head on over to patreon.com/The Main Quest. There's no obligation, just a lot of appreciation, and you get more show for your trouble. It's patreon.com/The Main Quest. That's it. Back to the show. Let's talk about the story and plot. And I had to write down exactly what it said in the manual because it's so of its time, dude. It's so, I mean, you can see it in the notes. So the story from the manual is as such. The dawn of humanity is no picnic. Just ask Joe and Mac. These two cave dudes just want to hang out and eat and drink. Don't we all?
And party with babes.
Right. But their peace is shattered when they leave their village to party in the mountains, only to come back and find out that some mean Neanderthals have come and kidnapped all the women. So Joe and Mac must now set off on a prehistoric rescue mission to rescue their cave girls. And you know that ain't going to be easy. Now with growling dinosaurs and more prehistoric creatures and dangers that you can shake a club at.
They really missed the mark there to call them mean Neanderthals, but
yeah, they really did because Joe and Mac are also Neanderthals, so I don't.
Yeah, it could have been mean Neanderthals. You know, Joe and Mac are chill boys.
All they want to do is just hang out, smash Monster Energy and Four Locos, and hang out with their babes. And
yeah, they're
so
pretty much LMFAO of the prehistoric era.
But the thing is when you beat the game, and there are multiple endings, and by multiple endings, I mean it may as well just be the same ending.
Only on the Genesis, by the way.
I don't think this game needs two endings. It's basically Joe and Mac running away from the babes that they saved. So do they want to save them or did they not? They just don't want the attention. They don't want the fame.
Do you know the other two endings? Because there's 3 on the Genesis.
There's 3? I thought there was only 2.
There's 3 on the Genesis. It's like, it wouldn't work these days. It would be shunned.
Are you talking about the like
they're running away from all the babes, right? Which is,
yeah.
Which I'm like, why? This is what you're doing. You guys are like total alphas, right? Like, so I don't know what's going on there.
Based.
Second ending, they're running away from one babe who is, let's just say, more than meets the eye. And the third ending is they're running away from what I assume is represented as a homosexual Neanderthal trying to kiss them. It's really weird because they give you that option too at the end to like pick one of the 3, but I might be jumping ahead. My apologies.
No, you're all good. I mean, my question is to you is, so I played through the game twice, and I mean, we may as well start sliding into gameplay here. I played through the game twice, and I was very surprised to see that they have multiple paths that you can take throughout the game. This doesn't drastically change up the game when it's all said and done. It doesn't really matter what path you take, because at the end of every level, you're just fighting the same bosses over and over again. The levels change a little bit, so it's like, all right, if you take the upper path at the end of level 1, level 2 is going to be it's scrolling vertically instead of horizontally. So you're still moving from top to bottom, no matter what path you take. So even if you take that lower path, you still got to do a top to bottom scrolling screen or whatever. And then at the end of that level, you're still going to fight a pterodactyl or something. It doesn't really matter. So I think my question to you is going back to the endings is, I assume you have to take a very specific path to get all 3 endings, because I only saw 2 different ones. And I was like, oh, well, that's probably it then.
Well, to be fair, I didn't complete the game. I played it multiple times. I streamed it. So I looked forward and saw that the multiple endings. But in regards to the multiple choices you get throughout the game of which path you take, kind of reminded me of Castlevania 3 a little bit. Okay. And B, I think it was because of the hardware limitations. The Super Nintendo version actually has kind of a Mario 3 like world map choice thing where you choose where you go next. Whereas
I remember that.
Whereas this Genesis version opts for more of the Castlevania 3 NES version of like, okay, you're at the end of the level, pick this path or that path. But also, I agree with you. It didn't really feel like it mattered at the end of the day. Kind of all leads to either a very similar type of level or, not enough variance there to really justify that. But I think they just wanted to show that they had variety in the game. And also it was sticking pretty close to the arcade in that instance.
Mm-hmm. How did you feel about the length of every level?
First off, I need to bring this up. So this game, the Genesis Joe and Mac, is like way harder than the Super Nintendo version. Like, it is like as hard as Puff Daddy at a YMCA. Like, it is ridiculous. Well, hey, we already got the chink thing in, so let's just go full bore. It is way more difficult. And I think the Super Nintendo version is kind of dumbed down to be more accessible. I think perhaps for the children, and the fact that it's supposed to be like the way it presents itself is very family dynamic. The Genesis version sticks closer to the arcade. And with that, I feel that it was super, like, I was very frustrated, very, very frustrated starting it out. But it also has this thing with it where you kind of like figure it out. And once you figure it out, it clicks and it's no longer hard. And that was kind of like my first impressions of the gameplay initially, because I was like, oh my God, there's so much going on. The length of the levels seemed very short, extremely short. And then you get to this boss. Whereas when I played the Super Nintendo version, they're almost twice as long, but they almost feel like fillers. And there's so much variance there. They changed the quality of life improvements. I shouldn't say like quality of life, because I don't think that like it's better or worse now playing both. But the length of the Genesis levels in particular really owe more to the arcade version of this game than the Super Nintendo version. And I think ultimately after playing both, I think the Genesis actually pulls off what the game initially wanted with its roots in the arcade. So, I mean, to make a long answer even longer, that is how I feel about the length of the levels.
Yeah, I was, one, surprised about the difficulty, and two, even more surprised at how short the levels are. And to your point about kind of the difficulty curve is that thinking about the arcade ports that I've played for the show, barring, stuff like Burger Time or Pac-Man and stuff like that, but like actual, 16-bit games that were getting ported later on, it was a lot of beat 'em ups for me. So like Altered Beast or Golden Axe. Oh God, I don't even know what else I've done on this show, but stuff like that, like in the beat 'em up genre, right? This is kind of like the first platforming arcade game that I've played for the show. I enjoyed the fact that though it was very difficult, there's not a lot of ways of getting yourself out of the corner. It really is a situation of you gotta get good, and I hate to say it that way. When it comes to the bosses themselves, yes, the bosses, there are ways to cheese the bosses. And I told you in the chat off air that when I got to the bosses, it was just like muscle memory. I was like, oh yeah, if I stand under him right here and just toss wheels at him for the entirety of the boss fight, I can get through it. Or if I, flip constantly and flipping, doing the double jump in the corner over here and tossing stuff at him, I'll be just fine. Stuff like that just is like ingrained in me. So I guess knowing that helped me a little bit. Whereas like in a lot of the beat 'em up ports and stuff like that, like you almost have to find a way to cheese them unless you're playing with a friend. And even then, a lot of the arcade ports can be just incredibly difficult, which I hate when arcade ports in this era were still incredibly difficult just to be difficult. I've always hated that. In the arcades, fine. Totally fair. I understand why they would still be difficult, but why you wouldn't change that difficulty for somebody who owns a console and is buying the game at, $50, $60 or whatever. It's just completely unnecessary.
Well, this game actually is. So there's a couple things here to unravel. First off, the game gives you a lot of options on the Genesis of like increasing your amount of continues in your lives, which is kind of stupid because of they're kind of the same thing. The game has a problem here with the way it uses its life system and its health system that bothers me. You have this giant health bar, but ultimately you only have 3 hits until you are killed. And once you're dead, you start the level over. So it's really no different than the continues they give you, unless you get to the boss and then you can restart right before the boss. Whereas like the Super Nintendo version kind of improved upon that with its quality of life choices of taking more hits, having a different life bar that are expressed with hearts. And anytime you die, you just start immediately where you are. You're the little angel, and then you can choose where you respawn. But also that made the game significantly easier. Where the game is like, I think, meant to be played the way it initially is via the Genesis, based off its source material of being an arcade. But like, I don't understand, like its health system is really doesn't make sense. But it is a very difficult game that requires you to replay it many, many times. But it does give you those options to, increase, like lower the difficulty, increase the amount of lives, and continues. So at least it gives you that. But I think that they should have just like really just reduced that health bar. It doesn't, you get hit and then you lose like 1/3 of it. And
yeah,
you're like,
man.
why there's so many, there's nothing in the game that hits you that takes away 1 health bar.
Yeah. Everything in this game hits hard.
Yes. Especially the bosses.
Yeah. Well, so, all right. So here's my hot take, and I've been saving this for the podcast. And I mean, I kind of already told you, but I'll go into it a little bit more here. And I mean, part of it has to do with the difficulty of this game. And as I was starting my second playthrough, I was like, man, this is just caveman, ghosts, and goblins. The movement is a little more forgiving, of course. I already mentioned like you get like a high jump or a double jump, but the weapons here are very similar to the ones that you get in Ghosts and Goblins, and the enemy placement and how much damage they do to you. Now, you're not dead after 2 hits. In some cases you can be, but I mean, the game is incredibly punishing. And just like in Ghosts and Goblins, there are weapons that are just objectively better than other ones. And it's very easy to accidentally pick up a less effective weapon, just like in Ghosts and Goblins. Because the weapon drops come out of eggs, which can also have enemies in them. So you're going to get a surprise attack there. In all of the chaos, you could accidentally crack one of these eggs and pick up one of the weapons, and then you're just kind of screwed for the rest of the stage. So yeah, I don't know if that's a hot take or not, but that's what I'm going with.
When you first brought that up to me, and that was before I decided to fire this up and try to complete it for the show, I thought that you were smoking crack. I was like, there's no way that Joe and Mac is anything like Ghosts and Goblins or Ghouls and Ghosts. And then I played it, and then I saw it, specifically the Genesis version, because you are correct. So the SNES version differs here in a sense of when you pick up the specials, you can cycle through them. So you keep all your specials. Oh, by specials, okay. I mean weapons, sorry. And
yeah.
So you can choose which one you want to use. In the Genesis version, Joe and Mac, what you pick completely overruns whatever you had before. And also very similar, at least I should say, to Super Ghouls and Ghosts, that only happens in the Genesis version versus the Super Nintendo, is that you can hold down and do a super attack with whatever weapon you have, which is very needed for all of the boss fights. And with it's as if they made a caveman version of Ghosts and Goblins that was, I'm going to say half as long, given this circumstance that you have to repeat Ghosts and Goblins twice.
Right.
And with a third hit, actually not a bad take. So it is actually kind of a Ghosts and Goblins, but specifically the Genesis version.
The thing here too, and after this, I think I'm pretty much done with gameplay, is that for a platformer, there's not a lot of emphasis on the actual platforming. Like, I never really thought, there's maybe like 2 stages that I can think of where you actually have to do a ton of platforming.
Yeah, and then they have those like scrolling stages, which I despised because it just doesn't keep up with, like, you're already wanting to like rush. And so when you get to the stages that you either have to jump up or you're falling down and you're being held by a pterodactyl, it kind of seems like everything's happening too fast for those levels. And I think it's because the brevity of the levels in general being short, that those ones suffer the most and also take away from its platform-esque-ness that it's trying to achieve. Where this is where the Super Nintendo version actually does better, because there are longer levels, they're slower, and so it does feel more of like a platformer than the Genesis one does.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird complaint to have. Like, I get it, but yeah, it's just, I don't know, for something to be called a platformer, and then when you really think about it, there's maybe like 2 stages in here that you could be like, like there's
lava.
There's the lava stage, and there's the other 2 stages. I guess there's more than 2, but like there's like 2 styles of stages. That's probably like a better way to phrase it. So there's like the vertical stages, So like the one where you have to like climb up the side of a waterfall, and then there's another one where you have to climb up like a canopy of trees, and then there's like the lava stage, and then there's that one stage with like the logs. That's probably like the most platforming you're going to get. Otherwise, it's just kind of like you're just going from left to right with not a ton of obstacles except for like the enemies that are in your way. And there are going to be a lot of enemies in your way.
Well, I mean, the same can be said about Ghosts and Goblins, though, right? Like, it's a platformer in a sense, but it's more of like avoid the enemies and then get to the boss, which is not as hard as the level is. In this instance, like this game, I think the difficulty is in both equally. But like once you figure out like all of it, like you figure out the level, you figure out the boss, the game actually becomes very easy.
Yeah, but Joe and Mac doesn't have a lot of areas for you to take refuge on, you know? Yeah. Welcome to the Ghosts and Goblins podcast. Ghosts and Goblins, the emphasis on platforming comes from the fact that the enemies, it works in tandem with Arthur's movement and the way the enemies are moving. Whereas Joe and Mac, there's not a lot of opportunities to read what's going on the screen because there are so many enemies on the screen. You know, there are times in Ghosts and Goblins where you're going to get overrun, but for the most part, you're maybe like working with one or two enemies on the screen. So yeah,
they don't respawn in Joe and Mac though.
No, yeah, you're right, but my point still stands in that it's like there's no. How do I want to like? There's no. I keep saying like place to take refuge, but there's no place to like. There's no place to really where you have to really move around a lot. You know what I mean?
No, you're right. You're right.
I don't know if that makes sense, but
there's no emphasis on the actual platforming other than just like left to right.
Because with Ghosts and Goblins, you have to keep moving.
Yeah. Especially the NES one. My God.
Yeah, I mean that's the one I'm most familiar with. That's the one I've played the most. So that's kind of my point of reference. So. Yeah. Anything else you want to touch on about gameplay?
Well, other than like, you know, the differences between the two are more stark now, experiencing them in a short period of time. Clearly, the Super Nintendo version is far easier and more aimed towards, I think, for lack of a better term, children. You know, it's really interesting to me to see that they added things to it that weren't in the Genesis one, like one-ups. There's no one-ups in the Genesis version. And then there's like this, they added this weird move that I think is kind of pointless where you hold down and hit a button and you spin like Sonic and you can climb walls that way, but it doesn't really add much more to the game. Outside of that, you know, they look so much alike and they're based off the same IP, but really they're kind of different games and one is better than the other. And that's all I got to say about gameplay.
Yeah, it sounds like to me that the Super Nintendo version has a little bit more polish to it. Does that sound like a fair assessment?
Yes and no. I mean, it depends. Obviously, the graphics are bigger, brighter. There's more animations in the background. But also, the Genesis one is more faithful. So it's kind of a matter of opinion if you're a big Joe and Macker. I think that if somebody was a big fan of this IP, I think they would like the Genesis one more than the Super Nintendo one.
Well, man, you know what time it is, right?
No.
It is time for today's game, and it is a game that I would like to call Word Count Panic.
Wow. I'm going to do so bad at this.
You know, I should have listened to Revenge of Shinobi to see how you did on that game. I don't even remember.
You did terrible.
Oh, you're scarred for life.
Yeah, I remember right now. It was when it was about like sidekick characters or something.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
So for Word Count Panic, the rules here are quite simple. The Wikipedia article on Joe and Mac contains 17,000 words.
Okay.
I'm going to give you 10 other Wikipedia articles that loosely relate to the game, and you have to guess within 1,000 words if that article has more or less words than the article that is dedicated to Joe and Mac.
Okay. Wow.
So first, I'll ask you if the article is higher or lower, and then the point will be awarded to you on the number that you guess. So, for example, does the article on Hawktua, the Hawktua girl, have more or less words in it than Joe and Mac?
Well, especially with this controversy, yeah, I think definitely more.
So you think it has more? Well,
Words?
you're incorrect.
What?
You're incorrect. It has less than Joe and Mac.
I'm going to change that right now.
Within 1,000 words, will you be able to land how many words Hawktua has? Joe and Mac has 17,000.
Oh, well, now that I know it's under, I'm going to say the Hawktua Wikipedia has 12,000. I'm not typing. You would hear if I did.
It has 2,000.
Oh, man. I was off by 10,000. I was close. Wow.
So that was just an example. All right. So
that doesn't count.
Right.
Over the line.
Just wanted to give you a little
Mark
warm
at
up
0.
there. All right. So remember our word count to work with here is 17,000. All right.
Yeah, now I know.
So the first Wikipedia article I have here is for the pterosaur.
The what?
Pterosaur.
Okay. Well,
A flying dinosaur.
I got a question for you. What made you come up with this game? This is such an intricate game. It's a great idea. Don't get me wrong, but I was like, man, this is really interesting idea.
I'm grasping at straws to keep the games fresh and relevant.
No, it's cool. It's cool. My hands are right here. You would hear if I typed because you would hear that. So the what-osaurus?
Pterosaur.
I don't know, man.
I might be saying that wrong.
Off the top of my head, I'm still going to go with over. So,
okay.
Yeah, I would go with the over.
It is over.
Huh.
It is over. How many do you, what's your guess?
I got to guess both? Okay. 17,000 is Joe and Mac. I'm going to say
you only get points for the number, but I'm helping you with the over under.
Great. Let's just make up the rules as
because
we
otherwise
go.
This would be a lot. It would be a lot harder if you were just guessing out the ether.
I mean, do I have to guess the exact number? I mean, can we Price is Right it? Like, okay,
within 1,000. Within 1,000
is still okay.
But if you don't get within 1,000 points, then you're not going to get the point. You can't just guess under. You can't just be like, oh, it's 18,000.
I almost said that. I'm gonna go with 21,000.
Nope, that's way over. It is 18,000.
I said I was going to go with 18,000, but it was your example.
Yep,
I would have been cheap.
You would have gotten it.
Oh,
you would have gotten it. I was
on.
trying to throw you
This
off.
is fixed.
All right, the next article here, man. Meat.
Just meat in general?
Just meat. Just the
that's
article
definitely under.
on meat.
Definitely under. I mean, you can't really go into super detail unless you go into like cooking, and they would have like side ones for that. I'm going under.
I don't know, man. Meat has been around for a long time.
Strongly going with the under.
Some would say is the dawn of man. All right, you are correct. It is under.
Ha! Now I gotta guess the number?
Yes, sir.
All right, I'm gonna go with 8,000.
You are 2 under there. It is 12,900.
It's the most fixed game ever. Do you work for a casino? I mean, that should be a point. Within 1,000?
All right, the next article I have here is the Sega Saturn.
Oh, God, over for sure. Easily over.
It is over.
Yeah. And
it is over 17,000.
Yeah, I'm going to say like something crazy like 29,000.
B-Ross.
Yes.
It is 17,300 words.
I'm totally going to guess just right around 17. I'm on to you. All right. You know, Chris Copleen would be like, yes, 28,000 is what it deserves. Right, shout out to the Retro Hangover, by the way. Great podcast. Him and Michael.
Oh, man. Only 2 people are going to understand that joke.
Yeah. Florida's best Keith. He knows what's
the
up.
next article, Wikipedia article I have here. Also, we didn't even talk about copyright infringement, which also this would be like the second game you're on for copyright infringement.
Of course.
Little Shop of Horrors.
Shinobi, right? Yeah. Little Shop of Horrors.
Yes.
Man, that's a good movie.
Really is, yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna go under.
It is less than Joe and Mac. Yes.
All right, 16,000. My God, I'm gonna stick around it.
No. It is
what is it,
7,600.
God damn it. See, I don't know why there's a second part of the game. I'm doing so good with the first part. I'm just mad. Too competitive.
I mean, I can stop telling you whether or not you're over or under.
No, I don't want you to change the game. No way.
Okay. All right. The next article is ninjas. Just ninjas.
Ninjas over for sure.
It is under.
Okay. Do I still get a point if I guess?
Yeah. Yeah, that's where
system.
That's where the points are made.
Okay. Well, if it's under ninjas, I'm going to say something crazy like 5,000.
Oh man.
What do you mean? Oh man.
It might be the closest you've ever been. It's 10,700.
Okay.
The next article is the wheel.
The wheel? Like
yeah,
just in general?
Like the wheel, like the invention.
The thing that's reinvented?
Wheel.
Yeah. The wheel.
The famous invention. Yep.
That's got to be super over. I mean, that's got to be way up there.
It is under.
Okay. Get 2,000. I don't even know what to guess anymore.
7,000.
7? That was my fourth guess.
I'm eagerly awaiting to highlight any of these.
Okay.
All right. I think you might have this one.
Okay.
I think this might be one. The European colonization of the Americas.
That's under.
It is under.
That's succinct. Yeah, that was there's not much to add to that. So I would put that probably somewhere around 12,000.
That's, you know what? I'm going to give that one to you.
Oh my God.
14,000.
It's because I'm such an American. Second generation.
You know all about colonization.
Yeah, I do. Spring break.
The next article is Jurassic Park.
Jurassic Park over.
It is over.
Yeah, it has to be because they have to probably talk about all the things that are the references. And I'm pretty sure that's going to be somewhere around like 21,000. I'm going to go with 20,000. What do you mean?
No. I mean, you're like
17.5.
No, you're like 111,000 off. It's 211,700 words.
You know, I should have thought of that because it'd probably bring up every dinosaur. Yeah.
Well, you also have to remember it was a book too.
I want to do like a podcast just on Jurassic Park. It would be
probably could.
Not a whole podcast, an episode.
I thought I got just dedicated to Jurassic Park.
Yeah. Welcome to Jurassic Cast. Yeah, that probably exists. Anyways, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
All right, switch it up here. Jurassic World.
Oh, under.
It is under.
Yeah, 5,000.
16,600.
Okay, well, fair enough. I get mad, but I'm like, I don't know what I'm judging the anger off of. Like, these don't realize I didn't like that movie. The logic's not there.
And of course,
Battletoads?
The man we all love, Chris Pratt.
Oh, that's going to be way over.
Oh, Chris Pratt has more in his Wikipedia article than Joe and Mac.
Yeah, maybe. Wait, do I get a chance to change my vote?
I'm just trying to make sure that that's what you think.
Like, I feel like I'm at a poker table right now, trying to gauge a read. All right, so I'm gonna do something. I'm gonna flip a coin. I have a coin next to me, just for when I guest star on podcasts. Heads is yes, tails is no. Heads, yes.
It is under.
Go. This coin does this to me every time. Okay, Chris Pratt. He sounds like an 11,000 word kind of guy.
You know, I'm going to give it to you. 9,500.
Thank you. You should have like a 5,000 variants. If there's an answer that is up in the hundreds of thousands, it's not fair to be. What if I was like 209,000? You're like, wrong. It was 212,000, you know?
Listen, everybody, B-Ross, everybody knows I don't put joke answers or joke questions in my games. Like, I just don't do that. I don't do anything to throw anybody off. I would never do that to anybody.
That's fair. You know what? I didn't remember that. For sure.
I know it's been a while. Well, I mean, hey, thank you for being my lab rat. I now know that I should maybe give a little bit wider of a margin here than 1,000. I thought. Yeah, I don't know.
Intricate game. You know?
Yeah.
I like it.
Just guessing the over and under and then the number. So
no, I liked it.
I appreciate that. This has been Word Count Panic. All right, let's close this thing out with the graphics and the music presentation, I guess you could say. I'll start off, and I will say on one hand, you know, this is a port of a game from 1991. To me, like by 1994 standards, like, and I don't know if this is it's probably the Genesis. I'm going to be real here. I don't like how a lot of games look on the Genesis. And I know that the Genesis wasn't very good with colors. It was very limited with the colors that it was using. So it probably wasn't a 1-to-1 conversion. And I think a lot of that stuff was lost in the conversion. So, and also the one thing I noticed about this game is that the parallax scrolling like is not very good and very underutilized in my opinion.
Well, it's more there in the Super Nintendo version for sure. Obviously a hardware limitation for the Genesis.
But I mean, with that said, the sprites are really good. I mean, these are like some gigantic sprites. All the characters are very expressive. There's a lot of character in the basic caveman enemies. And again, it's a lot of animations and sprite animations that remind me of stuff from like Bonk's Revenge. Everything emotes very good in this game. The bosses themselves are kind of hit or miss. Like the pterodactyl boss is just kind of floating there. There's not a lot going on. The mammoth is also kind of just sitting there, but like also like it has battle damage throughout the fight, which is kind of cool. I thought it was kind of a nice touch.
And like the only boss that has that.
Yeah, it's weird that the other bosses like don't get like a little bruised up or like a bandage doesn't show up on like the Brontosaurus or whatever. The T-Rex has a couple different, and I think honestly the first boss, the T-Rex, is probably like, I can't think of the word, but it's like, it's the first stage. Like a lot of people are going to see that boss. So they want to make it look as detailed as possible and as kind of have it emote as much as it can. Because a lot of people probably aren't going to see that much more of the game in the arcades. You know what I mean? So I think a lot of work was done on that boss specifically. But yeah, so I kind of feel like it's like, there's probably some stuff lost in the conversion. The game is darker than it looks in the arcade version, at least. Despite all of that, I mean, everything else, you know, the way that it was programmed and the way the sprites look and everything like that looks great in my opinion.
How do you feel about the sound?
So the soundtrack sucks. I hated it. There's like, I don't know, 3 or 4 songs in the entire game, and they get very repetitive, even though the game is in itself kind of short, depending on how often you have to replay through it. The sound effects are fine. So yeah, I think as far as the audio goes in this game, I don't see. Now I'm thinking back to some of the other the Genesis games, and those sound like a lot of the games that I've covered sound like trash.
Well, it's that sound chip, you know, like
I know.
I call it crunchy, you know, the crunchy Genesis sound. There's no way to avoid it. So it's like, it's one of those things where like, do you really have to?
Yeah. So now I'm trying to compare this to like those other games, and it's like far and away much better. Do I talk about it with context of those games, or do I just talk about it on its own? Because on its own, Joe and Mac is just not, it's not memorable. There's really not a lot here. But when you compare it to like the other games that were coming out on the Genesis, it doesn't even sound like it came out on the same console. So it's,
true.
Yeah, I don't know. What about you, man?
I don't know. It's interesting because now that I've spent my whole week doing some Joe and Mac research, which I didn't expect to do in December 2024, but I've realized that the game pulls off a pretty impressive arcade port that should actually be acknowledged. The graphics are closer to the arcade, at least in some aspects, on the Genesis than they are on the SNES. The SNES added more things. It added more quality of life. It feels like a 1.5 version of the arcade game, where the Genesis kind of focused on just being a 1-to-1, and did that with its limitations. And it really didn't bother me at first. I'll be honest with you. When I first started playing the game, I thought like it looked like played like it was super hard, felt janky. And then the more I played it, the more I looked into it, I realized that like this is actually more closer to its source material than the Super Nintendo. Not to say that the Super Nintendo version is worse, just in the sense of I think the Super Nintendo was trying to make a better version of what the Genesis did. And they kind of pulled that off, not completely. But I think that like it's very similar to this arcade that I never played before, that I had to look up and watch the footage of and realize that like they pulled it off. They should be given credit, especially with this system. If anybody was a fan of this in the arcades and they bought this for the Genesis, they were going to be happy with what they purchased, even though it's going to be different, obviously, and more difficult. But then at the same time, it's not really more difficult as opposed to having unlimited quarters in your pocket versus just restarting the game over and trial and error. But it's weird to me because at first it's such a 180 from my initial thoughts of being like, this game sucks, to like, this game's okay. This game looks and sounds okay. Specifically speaking of the graphics and audio. So that's my take on it. I mean, there are some changes that I wouldn't have known unless I looked it up, that they graphically with certain areas and certain bosses, but they did okay. If you never played the arcade, I would have been happy with this game, younger me, buying it on the Genesis with at least the way it sounded and looked, even though, my God, there's that crunchy Genesis sound that I just can't get out of my head with certain sound effects or the way certain tones are hit with songs. But yeah, for the most part, I liked it.
Yeah, I'm looking at some side-by-side comparisons here, and it's not terribly different. So the Genesis port is a little more dull.
Yeah, it's darker.
In color. But like they're showing the waterfall level, and
oh yeah,
the Genesis version has like water splashing all over the place.
Yeah,
the Super Nintendo version doesn't have that apparently.
Yeah, they took a lot of and also like the parallax scrolling is different for between those two.
So like I said, who's the programmer, Stuart Middleton, trying to take his no. Trying to take Stuart's quote into context here, like trying to get some sort of understanding of like what they had to do. And it's like, yeah, I get it. Like the Genesis was probably hard to work with. It's a miracle video games come out at all. It's a miracle that they're even, and that's the thing too. I mean, Sega was good at bringing the arcade experience home. You couldn't really say the same thing about a lot of the Nintendo consoles. Like Sega made it, they saw a corner of the market that needed to be addressed and they went for it, and they nailed it. They nailed it with the Genesis, they nailed it with the Saturn, and they nailed it with the Dreamcast.
That's true.
Yeah, I mean, I can't find a good excuse for the audio here. I guess that's really my main problem.
The sound chip. Yeah. The audio it's better on the Super Nintendo, like leagues better. It's just more floaty. Super Nintendo has an interesting sound chip that just feels more comfortable and more childlike. And the Genesis has more of like the only way I can describe it is like DOS game, like later DOS game style crunchiness. And I'm always going to prefer the Super Nintendo sound chip over the Genesis because there's that, I forget what it's called, but it's that crunchy, like I don't know, it doesn't work.
Yeah, you had to have like a degree in rocket science to be able to make
rocket knight science.
any music on the Genesis. Like it seems like it was an insanely impossible thing to do.
They also changed the sound chips between the Model 1 and 2. Not significantly, but enough to where like it's interesting when you play games on the same game between them, and like one game will actually have like better sound and more sound effects. It's very interesting. Didn't happen with the Super Nintendo.
So with all of that in mind, we are going to summarize our thoughts here. And if we could possibly recommend checking out Joe and Mac in 2025, just given context with where I've been with all of these Genesis games, Genesis platformers on the Genesis aren't sparse. Like it was the style at the time. But finding a good platformer on the Genesis, I feel like can be difficult. So I'm trying to think of like where this game lands in the pantheon of Genesis games that I've been talking about. As a game, Joe and Mac can be challenging, especially if you're playing it solo. There are some tricks to getting through the game that you will kind of just naturally figure out through repetition. I don't want to say this game is completely arcade hard. The levels are short enough that it doesn't feel like a punishment getting sent back to the beginning of the stage or anything like that. But it does beg to be replayed. The game also begs to be played co-op, and I enjoyed playing it solo enough for this, and I have enjoyed it playing this game way more with friends in the past. And as we just talked about, I mean, it's a miracle that games come out working at all, even when they're getting ported to stunted hardware. I was kind of ready to not recommend this, but after our talk, like, Joe and Mac's a good game. And I think it's definitely worth checking out. So I think it's a recommend from me. I think Joe and Mac would be a pretty decent addition to anybody's Genesis library. So what about you, man? Close it out.
Well, first off, I got to bring up this insanely hot take you had about like the Genesis not having like platformers.
No, it has platformers. It just doesn't have a lot of good platformers.
Oh, I disagree heavily with that. And I thought that, I mean, I love the Genesis, but I also love this. I like the Super Nintendo more. But I mean, like, the Genesis was not lacking on. I mean, we had like, even like niche things like Rise Star. We had like Rocket Knight Adventure, Pulse Man, all the Shinobis, even like Castle of Illusion, even though it was like on different things. Alien Soul. There's so much there that I think speaks to how this game doesn't feel like a platformer completely. It just feels more like an arcade game. And my initial thought on Joe and Mac on the Genesis, my first like hour playing it, was like, I hate this game. Like, I really was frustrated. And being somebody that came from adoring the Super Nintendo version, I was even more obliged to hate on it. But pushing through it, I realized that it is more in the vein of platformer as Ghosts and Goblins, like you said, is, than say a Mario or a Sonic or a Garfield caught in the act. I'm kidding. It's definitely its thing, and I think that it's worth playing if you are a fan of a type of game where you need to learn from repetition that hits your dopamine, your serotonin triggers, where you die, and then once you figure it out, you never die again. And that's kind of what like Ghosts and Goblins is that genre of. And shall I say maybe Castlevania Bloodlines and perhaps Contra to some extreme. But I think it falls in this area where it's not a bad game. I actually think now it etches a little further than the Super Nintendo version in being a better version of Joe and Mac. Because if I want to right now, if I want to play one of the two, I'm probably going to fire up the Genesis one, because it's now I feel more rewarded by figuring it out because of its difficulty. And I feel like as I blow through it, I'm going to be like, hell yeah, I'm good at this. Where if I fire up the Super Nintendo version, I'm going to be like, oh, this is a good memory of my childhood, and the game's nice and fun and floaty and blah blah blah. So yeah, I do recommend it. If this was on Super Garbage Day, I probably would give the game somewhere between a C+ and a B- at the end of the day. Where initially it started off as a D. So yeah, I got to give it credit. It grew on me.
It's interesting, and I can't wait till I get to the Super Nintendo version of this game so I can compare to it. And I feel like that's going to have to be an early Super Nintendo game that I cover, because by year's end, I should be on the Super Nintendo. So I don't know, man. At the end of the year, you might have to do your homework and come back on for the Super Nintendo version.
That's all I play is ninja games, caveman ninja games on your show.
That's all you're known for. Yeah,
that's true.
We're gonna change your name to Super Ninja Day. Super Ninja Day.
Me Neanderthal.
Chink.
Oh, hey. Great producer or whatever he was.
Oh man, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on tonight and talk about Joe and Mac, man.
Oh, that's my lifeblood, man. I love doing this. You kidding me? This is my pleasure.
Let everybody know what Super Garbage Day is and where they can find you.
Well, Super Garbage Day is my podcast that I do with my co-host Van Fernal and occasionally Mr. Miller and occasionally MK Keith. And we are a retro video game podcast where every week or every couple of weeks, we randomly choose a game picked by the community that is 20 years or older, and we have to play them, and then we talk about the game. And that's really it. It's a lot of fun. Keeps me going. I've met a lot of cool people through it, just like Keith here on the main quest. And if you're interested in it, just put Super Garbage Day in Google, and I think we just pop up. So it's all good, baby.
I back Super Garbage Day. I back all the work that you do. Also, dear listener, if this is the first time you're hearing B. Ross, you should go back and listen to him all the way when we talked about Revenge of Shinobi. It was a great episode.
Resident Evil 7, too.
And yeah, go to his feed, listen to Resident Evil 7. I think you were also on the Earthbound Halloween hack. We did that. Oh, God,
don't listen to that one. My mic was... Oh, I mean, do listen to it for the sake of main quest, but my mic was
it was awful. A great conversation. I enjoyed that episode.
I know. We should talk Earthbound one of these days.
We've been doing things together, and if you like main quest, you're definitely going to like what they're doing over there on Super Garbage Day.
Also Super Nintendo Draft you were a part of, which was super fun.
Yeah, there's something I might want to tell you a little bit later, but we'll take that off air.
Okay.
So before I get out of here, it's been a while since I've said anything like this, but I'm here on my knees, dear listener, begging for you to leave reviews or comments or just simply tell a friend or an enemy about the podcast. You got to help me fight the algorithm here. Together we can stop the inevitable disaster of AI taking over. Also, Player versus Podcast is coming up. You got to get those submissions in. Double check the rules. There's only 3 rules. They're pretty simple. No games over 20 hours. Can't be a game that I've covered. And 2 games per entry because Daddy Keith doesn't own every game under the sun, unfortunately. So next week on the show, I am staying in the prehistoric era, heading back to licensed game hell with a game called Jurassic Park.
On the Genesis?
And it's not that Jurassic. Yeah, not that Jurassic Park, B. Ross. It's another Jurassic Park.
Oh, okay.
But not that Jurassic Park, but the other Jurassic Park for the Genesis. There's a lot of Jurassic Park games just called Jurassic Park.
We did one. We covered one of those. I don't know if it's the same one you're doing, but I recall there was 2.
I don't think it was. I think this one's different.
Okay.
It's not that Jurassic Park. It's Jurassic Park.
Oh, forgive me.
We'll figure it out when we get there. Until then, take care of yourselves and always remember, it's okay to like a video game.
Oh, I tried to say it at the same time as you. Sorry.